world on a secret journey to planet Serpo. Did such a thing ever happen? Did human beings ever really go to another planet and then return? Well, I didn't believe a word of this story when I first heard it, and I'm not really sure where I stand right now, but it's an absolutely fascinating story, and a conversation I had with a scientist who's in a position to possibly know about such things said he had heard of such an event taking place back in the 60s. Today we have with us Len Kasten, who's written the book Secret Journey to Planet Serpo, a true story of interplanetary travel. Len is a UFO researcher, a freelance writer. He's a former member of NICAP, the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, and the Mutual UFO Network. He's got more than 50 published articles in Atlantis Rising, New Dawn magazines, and is the author of The Secret History of Extraterrestrials. So if anyone in the world is well able to put this story together, it's probably someone like you, Len. Welcome to Dreamland.
Thanks a lot, Willie. It's nice to be with you.
Folks, there are some sound issues with this edition of Dreamland that were not audible during the interview itself. We have done everything we can with the sound editor to reduce the effect of these annoying sounds, and we apologize. Normally, as you know, Dreamland produces sound of the very, very highest quality. That is not the case with this interview, and we regret this. And I hope that you can listen to it and enjoy it anyway, because it is quite fascinating. Well, as I say, I had lots of problems with this story, but before I get into that, why don't you set the scene for us? What is Planet Serpo? Why is it called that? Where is it, and who went?
Well, actually, we did not know the name of the planet until the Americans actually arrived there when they heard the name being said. And up until that point, we only knew that it was the planet associated with the crew of the crashed Roswell craft. That's all we knew at that point, and he was communicating with his home planet, and we learned later that they called it Serpo.
Now, how did we learn this from the survivors of the Roswell crash?
Well, of the Roswell crash, 4 aliens were dead, but however, there was one survivor, and that made all the difference in the world. The alien was taken to Los Alamos laboratories, where our scientists tried to communicate with him and eventually succeeded, even though his language was very strange to us, was very bizarre. They talked in tonal variations. They did not really speak words. But the Los Alamos people brought in language experts from all over the world, and eventually we were able to communicate with that alien and learned about his home planet. However, he was not able to communicate with his home planet for the 5 years that he remained alive, until just towards the end, just before he died in the summer of 1952. One of the scientists realized that perhaps if the communications device that was on the craft could be reattached to the power source on the crashed alien disk, that maybe it would work. They did that, and it worked. And the surprising thing about that was that we discovered it. He didn't discover that. But nevertheless, that was the case. And at that point, he immediately commenced sending messages to his home planet. He sent 6 messages. He did receive replies, which he then translated back for us. And then he died shortly thereafter.
We're going to find out more, and for our subscribers, we'll keep right on going. For those of you listening on the free feed, take heed of these messages. We'll be right back. We're talking to Len Kasten. His book, Secret Journey to Planet Serpo, a true story of interplanetary travel. How do we reach you on the internet, Len?
My website is www.et-secrethistory.com. That's et-secrethistory.com. And I have a lot of material on my website. descriptions of my two books and a lot of other interesting information.
Now, we were talking about the being that survived the Roswell crash, and there's been a lot of information out there suggesting that there was a survivor who was with us for at least a brief time. And I would be willing to grant that that might have happened. However, I was pretty amazed by a couple of things. First, that there could be much success in communicating linguistically. And second, that we were able to actually make the communications device he used to reach his home planet work. Now, how, given that the planet was obviously light years away, did it work? It must have been almost instantaneous communication, but how did that work?
I don't know. I know that there was a screen associated with it that he was able to read, and he knew how to use it once it was reconnected, and we eventually learned how to use it. It is an amazing device, a device that can communicate over 240 trillion miles. Over a distance of 240 trillion miles is truly remarkable. But going through the ether, so to speak, it may not be so strange if we think of it that way. If we think of it as going through another dimension, I'm not sure exactly how it worked. But I know that eventually they were able to improve it. After EVE number 1 died, our scientists were able to improve it tremendously using chemical lasers that could push it that could pick it up and push it over the distance. And at that point, when they discovered that, communications with Serpo became much more reliable and much more frequent.
Now, Richard Dolan, noted UFO investigator, has described something that he calls the breakaway civilization, a human civilization in possession of such advanced technology that it in effect exists on another plane from the rest of us. And I've had personal contact with that human civilization because human beings using extraordinary technology placed an implant in my left ear. Everybody who listens to the radio program knows about it. I'm not going to go into it. If you don't know it, just go to unknowncountry.com and search on the term Whitley's implant, and you'll find out all about it. In any case, the object is there. The experience was real. The object has been analyzed to a degree. It is far beyond anything that we on the outside know. So as far as I'm concerned, some of this has to be real. Now, I want to know, though, what happened that led to people attempting or actually going to another planet.
Well, we had actually been dealing with this race of extraterrestrials, which they named the Edens. It's kind of an unimaginative designation. It stands for extraterrestrial biological entity, and so they became known as the Edens. We wanted to understand more about his civilization, naturally, but we wanted also to know about his technology. And the scientists realized that the craft that crashed in Roswell could not have been the one that traveled through the interstellar space. It was just too small. It was more in the nature of a scout craft, and that probably there was a mothership in orbit around our planet. And so we discovered later, much later, that that's what happened, that they did communicate with Serpo, and it was determined that they would send another scout craft down here. And that craft was the one that landed at Kingman, Arizona in 1953. So the four occupants of that craft then helped us to develop our own anti-gravity craft at the Nevada test site. And do you know about Bill Newhouse? Have you heard of him?
Yes, I have, and I'm very curious what you might have to say about But tell us a little bit about first who he was.
Well, Bill was an ex-Marine, and he was a engineer that was recruited to work at S4, which is part of the Area 51. And he worked with the Kingman craft, and his job was to build a simulator for our pilots to use. And according to his testimony, which is on the internet, and I think Linda Moulton Howe knows about it, everyone knows about it, he claimed that we eventually were able to duplicate their craft by 1962. And we had essentially a working anti-gravity disc by 1962. By working jointly with the 4 occupants of that craft. In other words, they landed here. They didn't crash at Kingman. It was actually a landing, and the craft was taken by a tank trailer from Kingman to the Nevada test site where our scientists worked on it. So what I'm trying to point out here is that we had those 9 years of communications and interactivity with the aliens from Serpo that President Kennedy knew nothing about when he issued the edict for the exchange program. So our people, especially MJ-12, were very confident that we would have a successful exchange program because of that interaction that had taken place between 1953 and 1962. We were not just sending 12 Americans across the galaxy on a reckless mission. We had many reasons to know and to feel confident that it would all turn out okay. And I made that point in my book.
Yes.
I have a whole chapter on the Kingman incident.
Now, the people who went, are any of them still alive? Are back?
No, they came back in 1978. They stayed there for 13 years. They lost track of time. Unfortunately, they were only supposed to stay for 10 years. They wound up staying for 13 years. 7 of them returned in 1978. There was a landing in 1978 in August I believe that one was in the mid-Pacific. And they remained alive. The last one died they remained alive until 2002. At least the last one died in 2002 in Florida. So
did you ever meet any of these people?
No. I came into this a long time after the last one had died. The last participant in the program died in 2002 in Florida.
And how was it that you came to know more about this?
Well, this entire matter was revealed over the internet by somebody who called himself Anonymous in November of 2005. He started sending emails to an insider UFO network of email people, about 150 people who consider themselves somewhat insiders, government people, ex-intelligence people. They had this network, and he sent these emails to that network, started sending them in November 2005. Eventually, after a couple of months of him sending these emails in, the participants realized this was valuable information, and they gave it its own website. And one of the members of that group, Bill Ryan, who was British, volunteered to create the website and to maintain it. And that became the website we now know as www.serpo.org. And all the material relating to the Serpo adventure was sent to that website and eventually was fleshed out with a lot of other anonymous information. People sending in information that they had about the program, and they also remained anonymous. So eventually it added up to about 13,000 words, which is approximately what it still is today.
There was an attempt to make a movie based on this material, wasn't there?
It could be. I'm not aware of it.
Oh, okay. I didn't know whether you had participated in it. It doesn't matter. I was just curious about it. When we get back, folks, we're going to get into what it was like for these people and whether they win or not, I mean, we'll never really ultimately know. But it's a very interesting story. I think you'll agree. And Lynn, I thank you for being with us. It's most interesting. Secret Journey to Planet Serpo is his book, a true story of interplanetary travel. And I have to tell you, it's filled with fascinating information. It will certainly make you think. His website is et-secrethistory.com. That's et-secrethistory.com. We'll be right back. Secret Journey to Planet Serpo. We're talking to Lynn Kasten, his book, Secret Journey to Planet Serpo. Did it ever happen? Well, we'll probably never know for sure, but it's certainly an interesting story. Lynn, tell us a little bit about what they found on planet Serpo. Well, no, let me back up. Wait a minute, Lynn. Let me back up a little bit. Getting there. Can you describe the process of getting there?
Well, it was very uncomfortable for people. The first half of the journey, they had to sit in enclosed, transparent globes so they could be observed. And they were sealed, and that kept them relatively comfortable. The journey took 10 months, and the aliens eventually informed them that they had to travel through time waves. They created what they called time waves, and this translates really to wormholes. They knew how to travel through the wormholes, and once in the wormhole, my understanding is that the travel is virtually instantaneous. When you think about it, a journey of 10 months to travel 40 light years means that they traveled at 40 times the speed of light, which is incredible and certainly violates everything Einstein ever talked about. But nevertheless,
go ahead.
That's what they claimed. The length of the journey was 10 months.
Now, interestingly enough, folks, we think, traveling through wormholes, what could that possibly mean? Well, it means something to somebody because NASA has a program in place to make us capable of traveling and moving through and controlling wormholes within 100 years. That's real. So somebody thinks it's possible, and maybe they think it's possible because they've seen it done. Could that be true? I would assume so. So there's a piece of interesting, subtle, corroborating evidence there. Okay, Lynn, now we've reached planet Serpo. What do we find?
Well, we must have known well in advance that they would be comfortable in that atmosphere, and I'm sure we did. They were comfortable there. The atmosphere had the four essentials: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, that were required for respiration. It was extremely hot, but they did land in the equatorial region, so that explains some of the heat. It reached as much as 125 degrees, but the Americans were quartered in an underground facility which was cooler, and they were able to live relatively comfortably in that underground habitation. Eventually, however, they were moved to one of the northern quadrants of the planet, where it was much cooler. Apparently, the Ebens preferred the heat; they thrived on it, but our men were very, very uncomfortable, and eventually they lived in the northern quadrant, and they claimed that portion of the planet was very comfortable. The climate was something like Montana. It had the same kind of foliage, same kind of same kind of atmosphere as Montana. So they lived out the final 7 years of their habitation there in that quadrant. They were given a sort of a device that traveled, an anti-gravity device that traveled without sort of a helicopter-like device, but it didn't have the blades. It was anti-gravity, and they were given one of those to travel wherever they wanted. They were given complete freedom. They were treated with care and consideration, and ultimately they determined that the Ebens were very considerate and caring people, and they were very pleased with the relations with them.
Now, Did they ever meet any other human beings there?
As far as I know, no, but there were entities there from other planets. They did see them, and their liaison person, who was they called EDE number 2. She was a female, and she was very, very fluent in English. She was able to speak in English. She informed them that that they did have beings there from other planets. The Evens had been traveling throughout the galaxy for thousands of years, and they did have other visitors. But as far as I know, they did not encounter any other humans.
Now, did anyone on the expedition die?
Yeah, they did. One of them actually died en route to Serpo. They were given all the 12 participants were given 3-digit numbers as identifications. Their actual identities were taken away. The one that died en route to Serpo was number 308, and he was one of the pilots. They had 4 pilots in the group of 12. 308 died of a pulmonary embolism on the way to Serpo. But the commander wasn't concerned about the disposition of his body until they got to Serpo, at which point he asked for the body, and that started a whole new chapter.
It sure did. Tell us about it. It's quite a story.
Yeah, it created a confrontation that could have turned into something very ugly, but it didn't, fortunately.
Well, tell us why it created this confrontation.
Well, when the team commander asked for the body, they told him that the body no longer existed, that they had used it for creating biological entities in their laboratories. They had used the blood, and so he was irate, and he said the body belongs to the United States government, planet Earth, and he wanted it. And they said no, it's no longer in existence. They said it was in this. They showed him the container in which they had kept the body. It was a metal container, sort of like a coffin. And he actually told his men to go get explosives and to blow it open. And they said, no, hold on. They said, guns are not necessary, explosives are not necessary. And they brought in a doctor, an even doctor who knew the whole story, to talk with the team commander. And the doctor explained to the commander that they had a biotechnology capability, and they were very pleased to have the body of 308 to use to clone and to create other hybrid creatures. And this is what started the confrontation.
Well, yeah, but I've always understood that one of our government's greatest fears is that there would be aliens here who appear to be entirely human, but are not, and have concealed loyalties and motives. And I thought to myself, I wondered how many such beings could be created out of a single body, and probably a whole lot. Maybe there are a lot of people created out of this one man.
Yes, and but I think that the human-like aliens that we do encounter here on Earth are really from a planet that has such a civilization, the one they call the Nordics, or the Pleiadians.
I've met a number of them, and they don't. I take that back. One of them looked somewhat human and wasn't huge. The ones I've really been with have been 7 feet tall. They couldn't even walk the streets of New York without causing concern.
Exactly, and this is what really concerned our military people, is that they could be walking the halls of the Pentagon.
Well, exactly.
Right, and we would not know it. So, but that's a different race. The Edens are short. They're about 4 feet tall. They have brownish skin. They have human-like features, but they're more diminutive. They're smaller, and their blood system is completely different. Their biology is completely different. So
did they have farms or anything? How did they eat?
They use what we now call hydroponics, and our people were shown their hydroponics facility. They can, with hydroponics, you don't even need soil.
Right.
You just need water. And they had these huge hydroponics facilities on the planet. and that's how they grew their food.
Now, when our people were shown the hydroponic facilities, in the book it reports that they were mystified by them, and I found that rather surprising, since hydroponic farming became, it says in the book that it was something new in the 60s, but it wasn't. It was started in, the word hydroponic came into use in 1937, and the actual processes began to be used in the late 19th century. So it shouldn't have been at all surprising to them, and it made me wonder again about how accurate and true this book is, frankly.
Well, they had two scientists out of the 12. Two were scientists, but they weren't necessarily into agricultural development. I think they were more like physicists. It is not surprising. I don't think hydroponics was widely used in the mid-60s. It may have been known about, but somebody who was not basically had not been studying the latest agricultural science would know about it. So it's conceivable that it was surprising to them. It certainly wasn't. If it was used in the 60s, it wasn't used on any kind of a large scale at all.
Well, that's true, although our next-door neighbor had a hydroponic garden, and he had bought a kit at the local hardware store to build it. So,
what year was that?
Oh, that would have been 59 to 62, somewhere in there.
Okay.
So they were around. I mean, I can understand why people wouldn't know what they were, because I don't think that they were exactly on every doorstep in every backyard. But in any case, it sort of surprised me. Now, let me ask you about their return. They returned to Earth, and there's a lot of material in the book written by one of them. It's all misspelled, and why was that? I mean, why would they send somebody who was seems to me, barely in command of the English language, and then expected to eventually come back and tell one of the greatest stories ever told?
Yeah, as far as I know, the team commander was an Air Force colonel. That's all we know about him at this point. He was writing in his diary as things happened, or immediately after they happened. He certainly wasn't any kind of a literary person, you know that. And he used a lot of shortcuts and just to get his thoughts down on paper. So that doesn't surprise me that he would have made all these mistakes. And Anonymous, who released this information, wanted it kept exactly the way he wrote it. Did not want to enhance it or correct it or anything. So that's why it appears that way in the book.
No,
and I think that
go ahead.
I think that was a wise decision.
It's not difficult to trace emails. We've done it all the time. Whenever we get a death threat, it goes to a security firm that traces the identity of the emailer in a couple of minutes. And we find out who it is, and if necessary, the police are contacted. And I get death threats 2 or 3 times a year. So I've seen emails being traced routinely. Why couldn't Anonymous's emails have been traced?
Or they probably could have. Who would do the tracing?
Well, I mean, the people, you can hire a firm to do the tracing. I could direct you to a number of them.
Well, let's start with the fact, first of all, that the moderator of the email network was somebody who is called Victor Martinez. Victor was the one that Anonymous sent all the emails to. He was the moderator. Victor knows the identity of Anonymous.
He does. I see. I thought no one knew. I didn't understand that.
No. Victor knows who he is. Victor knows who he is, and Victor communicates with him.
So he's still, and Anonymous is still very much around.
As far as I know, he's still alive, yes.
Yeah.
My personal belief is that he was a member of MJ-12. And not only was he involved in the debriefing of the 7 returned Americans, which, by the way, resulted in a 3,000-page book. They were debriefed for a full year. Anonymous had access to that book. But I also understand that he probably had been a member of MJ-12. We do know that he was the editor of the Red Book. The Red Book is a complete history of all of our contacts with ET and UFOs. So as a person who sat down with sitting presidents and briefed them on the Red Book, he had to be way up in the intelligence hierarchy. So he was known by Victor, and my understanding is that two of the other people in the network knew who he was. Somebody named Gene Laskowski and somebody named Paul McGovern, both of whom contributed information to the website.
Secret Journey to Planet Serpo. Could it have happened? Well, it turns out Len's made a pretty darn good case, and his book makes for fascinating reading. High adventure at its best. For subscribers, we're going to get into the Steven Spielberg connection. What was really behind Close Encounters of the Third Kind? And was there a sequel intended that never got made, and why not? We'll find out in the subscriber special interview. Do become an UnknownCountry.com subscriber. It's a very enjoyable, inexpensive, and wonderfully informative area of this website.